get underway. So the first thing is that most of us who are small business owners, we're working so many hours and we end up looking like everyone else because we're listening to the gurus, we're listening to the YouTubers, the Instagrammers, all the trendsetters, the people that seem to be doing really well. We don't actually know that they're doing well. We're just being told that they're doing well. And then we think we need to follow them. So we have these beautiful headshots, the most incredible photos, the most beautiful websites, usually built in Squarespace, right? Or it could be, a business card or signage or something that's telling you that this person is doing really well. And we call that wealth signaling. They're signaling that everything's great, but meanwhile, we don't know that their lives are falling apart. What we see is these bios that are very generic. They soften out accents if they have them. They have websites that could be from pretty much anyone. It all starts to look the same. There used to be about 10 years ago a phenomenon where everyone looked like they produced their graphics on Canva because they did produce their graphics on Canva, and there was a lot less diversity in those graphics. So we said to follow what was in the top of the list of Canva templates and call that what was trending and what we wanted to do. But there is a bit of a myth of sameness, which says, that if we see that, it equals credibility, it equals success, it equals someone who's worth trusting with our time and money. It doesn't so much anymore, as we started to realize through the influencer economy that it's all built on a house of cards and it's all built on lies. That these people who are wealth signaling are often into debt up to their eyeballs. They're not delivering anything. And quite often what they're doing is producing courses and communities and those sort of things without any credibility of actually working in the space that they're apparently teaching. They just kind of told us they are because they followed it from some other course creating guru who said, this is how you do it. This is the template. This is the framework. But you're not alone. About 84% of us experience imposter syndrome. I get it all the time. I was literally just, an hour ago at a very fancy, very expensive school where I was helping students with their entrepreneurial endeavors. And I walked in there feeling like having gone to public schools and having been in a very sort of a very modest background myself, walking there with all my level of the things that make me feel like I'm not good enough and I'm being an imposter being there. 86% of us still feel like frauds, even if we're successful. So I had that today. And by all the measures of what people usually think success is, I probably got that. But I still felt like a fraud. I still felt like I didn't belong there. But the kids there didn't think of anything. They just saw me as an expert who was brought in on a particular thing that they wanted to learn. So they didn't see that. It was all in my head. That doubt doesn't go away just because revenue is starting to grow. And you probably notice it, if anything, when the money comes, the insecurities actually get further exposed because then we've got something to lose. What if I can't keep this going? Or in some of our cases, we actually lost that stuff. We lost that money and we're struggling to come back from it because of various reasons. The thing is that the part of you that feels a little too much, a little too soft, a little too strange, a little too ethnic, a little too loud, too niche, too queer, too old, too young, too fat, too thin, you name it, that's usually the most attractive thing about us. It's the most commercially valuable thing that we have in our filing cabinet. And we've been filing it under weakness, right? I do that, a little too queer, a little too overweight, a little too over the top sometimes, a little too scattered, or too ADHD, that's for sure. And I filed all that under weakness and I hid it, I suppressed it. I would apologize when those things would come out. Where it actually belongs is in the brand. It's right up front and center, very visible, right in the middle of what people actually see about you, which is the complete opposite of what everyone's taught us all our lives, which is to be ashamed of our shortcomings. Our differences were something to be pushed down as we all became suit wearing clones walking through London, Sydney, Melbourne, New York, and Perth. We just had to be like everyone else. That's why we went to university. That's why we went to schools, to become just like the people before us. Except that most of us well, I'd say all of us who are on this webinar today and everyone who will watch this, we're outliers. And the funny thing about outliers is they're not really outliers. Everybody's an outlier in some way, shape, or form. We just feel like we can't bring it because our outlying is too much, too ADHD, too unfocused, too desperate, too And the too old, too young thing comes up quite a lot. Yeah, there I was today, though, advising 14-year-olds on what to do with their future entrepreneurial endeavors and thinking that I was too old to speak to them. And they were thinking they're too young to succeed. Our individual insecurities met each other in a room. What has changed is that this whole generic sameness is now happening at scale because of AI. It has killed the polished and generic because it's become so overdone that everyone literally looks, sounds, and speaks and preaches the same. The old playbook was to be safe, after all. It was to be professional and it's do stuff that you spent years perfecting and creating and polishing and getting rid of all the sharp edges. But the new reality is that anyone with a chat GPT subscription right now can pretty much write the same thing as I can, as what you can, as what anyone else can. So then we think, well, if a chatbot can do it, it has the same trust level of it as a chatbot. And we don't really trust chatbots with our children or with our businesses or with our money or with anything really, because we know those things can lie. They're just taking the sum total of everything that's brought in around the topic we're speaking about, especially ourselves as consultants, as specialists, as trainers, as advisors, and just packages it up neatly to the average. This is what the average person who's doing this should be. That's the truth of what's happening right now. We've always leaned towards the average anyway because it felt safe, but we're essentially all outliers. Every single one of us who's probably watching this is an outlier in some way. I am too old. I am too fat. I am too crazy. I am too all over the place, too unfocused. I travel around the countryside, swanning around in, I think, hotel rooms and all that sort of thing. I'm too unfocused and too not present. I'm not from there. I'm from here, but the reality is not from anywhere. All this stuff ends up making us look like we're not just out of touch in our reality, but we're also in a place where it doesn't really make sense for us to try and be different because it feels dangerous. Just one. That's the beauty about being with a in a hotel room, is that housekeeping knocks at the door at the most inordinate of times. So those new realities, and that's just a perfect example of it right now. I could have tried to hide that, but I came back and said, that's what just happened. That's the reality of the life that I live. And this is a little bit where we start to lean into what those insecurities are doing to us. I could have just gone, oh my goodness, it's so horrible, it's so horrible. But I've actually just integrated it into this presentation. So what's next? Well, what still works out there is that 70% of your consumers feel that stronger connection to people who are very visible and very human. So that makes sense because I tend to trust the people who I have some kind of affinity with, an alignment with, if you like. And that texture, that specific thing that only I would notice about someone, is often what makes me draw to them. I'm actually drawn to the insecurities in people. And funnily enough, the empathy that we feel as human tends to draw us into that. Whilst the logical part of our brain may just go, you know what, I want to work with them because look at how damn successful they are. The reality is that all of us are making decisions first. Like it's like something like 800 times faster we've made a decision in the back of our brain to do something because it's just instinctual to us, rather than making the logical decision. 50%, 7% of buying decisions say that visibility directly drives their buying decisions. This is the theory of mere exposure. So people will trust you more because they have seen you, even just the once, but you immediately are ahead of 99.999% of people that they haven't seen yet. They haven't had any experience with. The people I work with are generally because I've worked with them before. The people who I'm thinking of working with who are new are generally people who I may not have worked with before, but I've seen. They're very visible. They're very active in the world. Then there's this too much inventory that we tend to pack into ourselves. I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too ethnic, too queer, too regional, too late, too much on the West Coast. No one on the East Coast wants to hear from me. I'm too much on the East Coast. No one on the West Coast wants to hear from me. I'm too Australian. I'm too out there. I can't talk to any Canadians or Americans. I'm too niche. I'm too weird. I've got the wrong hair. I've got no hair. I've got big ears. I've got blue eyes. I've got brown eyes. Look, there's always going to be a reason for it. In 2026, this difference, all those too much things, are the only thing left that we've got that's unique. Everything else, the materials, the internet, the visuals, the headshots, the logos, the colors, someone somewhere has done it all before. So the only thing we can do is reframe all that into who we are. And that means often bringing the not so nice bits of ourselves forward from being sort of pushed down and put in the back cupboard to being now what's in the front of the house. So every item on that list is a description just of one thing, which is difference from the average. I don't know. I don't like working with average people. I like to work with people who are beyond the average, that are a little bit different, a little bit crazy. The reframe could be if you've got an accent that doesn't seem to fit into the environment you're in, that makes you recognizable. If you've got the crazy blue glasses, the green glasses like my other ones, that's the thing that makes you memorable. You starting late in life at a business becomes a point of difference where you say, well, I've got relevant lived experience, and that relevant lived experience can be something which sets you apart from others. The overthinking is mental rigor. It means you are careful, you're very thoughtful. Every decision you make is very strongly considered. Your niche, which is previously seen as potentially a limiting factor, is actually now a category that you own. So instead of perhaps being a migrant woman who has an accent, who's doing business consulting, you become a migrant woman doing business consulting with an accent who works with other migrant women who are an accent and need consulting from a business consultant. That's a category that you can own. And yeah, sure, like you might be living in a regional center. There's not enough other people like that for you to appeal to. That's the beauty of the internet. You can go anywhere. And all micro segments are underserviced at the moment, meaning if there's a particular group of people that you have a very strong affinity with, they're already underserviced. There's already people who can't find someone who gets them or understands them. Now, there's one thing I've worked with an ADHD entrepreneur about 2 weeks ago in Darwin, and she was just like, "Oh my goodness, you understand me, you get it, you know the crazy." And I said, "I can follow the crazy because I got the crazy too, girl." And so we then connected over the thing that made us unattractive and unworkable and crazy and messy. It worked because we got each other. I understood every word she was saying because I could see it through the lens of my own neurodiversity. Your weirdness is a memorable filter. It makes you the person who is recognized as outstanding in a world of clones that all wear the same, do the same, look the same, and act the same, and say the same thing. So think about this. Castle has a moat around it to protect it from invasion or being ransacked, right? Your identity is your moat. Nobody else has the specific set of experiences you've had, all the things you've had to overcome, the things that you class as your sense of humor or the way that you approach problem solving. A competitor can't copy this stuff with a ChatGPT prompt. All they can do is try and approximate it, but when they go to communicate it, it comes off as fake and insincere because we know damn well it's not them, because they've also put a lot of themselves out there, which doesn't match any of that stuff. So the definition of moat really is this advantage that's so personal, so close to you, it's so much part of your lived experience that no tool, no ChatGPT, no Gemini, no Claude code can ever replicate that thing about you, right? That's the thing that you bring. Your stories, your examples, your client results are all yours. They're all part of you. The way you approach it is because you have a specific way of thinking, whether it's neurodiverse or whether it's neuro normal or whether it's, based upon your medical training or based upon your training as a classical Greek translator. It doesn't matter. Those things bring the uniqueness into what you're doing. That means that, yeah, sure, you might come to the same conclusion, but the way you explain it really appeals to someone who's also gone through that level of difference that's not the same as the norm. Different is good, like Aldi, right? Good, different. So the stereotype loop that we get caught up in, unfortunately, means that a lot of us who are particularly one-person businesses, we build our professional identity in opposition to the stereotype that we read through as kids. So that would be, for instance, we watched the movie called Wall Street in the 1980s and believed that that's how all businessmen operate. We saw an angry person down at the corner shop in the 90s who used to talk to us. We believe that that's what people should be like. We watch people in suits wandering aimlessly through trains in major cities, going from office to coffee to office to coffee, and thinking that is the way the professional acts. That's just the way they act. Doesn't have to be the way you act, and you don't have to fit into that. Because I don't know if you've just noticed, but not everyone really wants to be that anymore. It's actually people are starting to want to be something different, something special. We all want to be special because we grew up all being told we're special, we're unique, one of a kind. And then we spend our lives trying to be someone who's not one of a kind, not special, not different. So the problem is being in argument with a stereotype is still being defined by it. If you're trying to fight off the stereotype of the kind of person you are, then you are being defined by that. So what we do as sharp entrepreneurs is we drop that argument entirely. We get out of this argument with ourselves about the things we're supposed to be, and then we step into something that's a little bit different and a little bit better, namely vulnerability used well. Vulnerability has really, really good usefulness if it has these three traits. It has to be firstly specific. It's not, oh, I struggled as a child to understand things. Oh, I've always never had money. It has to be really, really precise, a real moment where you go, I lost everything. I came out of this losing everything because my funding disappeared, or for some reason I had a bad run in with a business partner, or my landlord completely pulled the rug from me. This can't be vague. It can't be so relatable to so many people that it becomes actually relatable to no one. It has to be specific to be your story. And every one of us has some kind of moment of either suffering or breakthrough, or coming through against the odds. That's very much our story, but it also has to be relevant to what our customer needs to know about us, right? If they go, well, if I play the failure card very well, so I talk about my failures constantly all the time, not because I want people to feel sorry for me, not because I need to somehow disqualify myself from people who don't want to work with failures, but because I want to show that despite those failures, here I stand. Despite those things happening and falling down, sometimes of my own fault, sometimes of others, it is still going to be something where I made it through. I still did really well in spite of all that. So that paints resilience. It paints the ability to get creative, to come back. And in case you hadn't noticed, a lot of people have failures in their lives. They don't talk about them, but they do have them. So those failures for me, I use because they share a story with someone else. They go, oh, I've had failures in my life. I can understand that. I feel like I can connect with you and I align with you because I want to be more resilient. But your vulnerability also needs to point forward into the future. It can't just look at the past, at what happened. It has to point to something that you do better now as a result of the failure or of the vulnerability. So if you were late stage diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, you can't sit in the I'm an ADHD adult, look at me, woe is me, everything's so hard because of all this. And you can't sit in that forever. What it is, it's the story, but it needs to move on. As a result of that, I've been medicated, or as a result of that, I've now got behavioral changes that have helped me to succeed. I've learned to see my ADHD as something which can be used when channeled really well into amazing creativity, but the bits that made me very scattered and all over the place, those are things that I've now been able to push down. Those things don't affect me anymore. You don't want to go too much further on it. That's where you start talking about your memoirs and writing a book or a TV series. You want to talk about your life if it's that interesting. It just has to be something specific, something relevant and relatable to someone who you want to work with. And it has to point to you overcoming that relevant failure or vulnerability, or moving on despite it, or bringing it with you, as so many of us do when we have those vulnerabilities. They don't go away, but we bring them with us. We produce some kind of, I guess, a framing of it, which shows that despite this, I'm still great to work with. So the four stages are: you need to do a bit of an inventory, identify what it is you've been hiding away, what it is you've been looking at and going, oh, I'm too much of this, I'm too much of that. Then audit that for relevance according to the work you do. So, for instance, is ADHD a superpower if you are an accountant? Probably not, because you want an accountant to be very, very details and oriented and very much focused on the thing that they're doing at the time. But if you're looking at creativity and the ability to be able to grow a business through really effective use of digital tools, then ADHD can be a good thing, right? Or likewise, if the inventory says you're too old, well, that's beautiful, because there's going to be people who really don't want to work with 19-year-olds. They want to work with people who've had lived experience, because they too have had lived experience through life. So audit for what those things match. If you are a 55-year-old woman, well, I can almost guarantee that other 55-year-old women would probably want to work with you, because they can relate to that. They're not feeling like there's someone preaching to them from another era. They're talking to someone who gets their cultural references. And then you let those things show up in that next stage. It shows up in the bio on your LinkedIn profile. It shows up on your services page. It could be your story brand script message that's on the first page of your website above the fold. It could be the examples that you show. I worked with Karen, who was 56, and we achieved this. And someone, you can't be what you can't see. You don't tend to want to buy something which isn't appropriate for you. I don't necessarily want to work with a consultant who only works with people who earn seven figures every month, live in America, and drive Porsches and Ferraris. I don't want Porsches. I don't want Ferraris. I'm not American, so I don't relate to that kind of hypey guru stuff. And then track the quality of the people who are coming in. Is what you're doing, that have you got enough of a relevant match between what your insecurities and what your vulnerabilities are, and the match of what the kind of thing you think is relevant to the audience you're trying to reach, and with all the things you've done of making it visible without making it all about that, is that working? Is it actually working? Who's it bringing in? I'm going through this right now. Completely changed the approach to my LinkedIn, away from being like you're chasing the metrics of the likes and the engagement and the shares. And I've gone specifically for a very, very, very narrow audience of people who need a very specific thing from me. And my engagement and my views have just crashed, absolutely annihilated, crashed. And the result of that is, whilst all that has crashed, my revenue's up, my inbound messages are up, the quality of the customers coming to me are up. There is an advantage if a regional, for instance, if you're a founder in in the outback in, let's just say, Alice Springs or even Darwin, when you flatten your voice and your sound and the way you present yourself to sound more like someone in Sydney, you're making a really big mistake, because that thing about your accent, about your look, about your way of thinking, that's the moat. I've worked with a woman who is from Central Australia, and she got the broadest ochre accent. And I tell you now, I love listening to her because the stories sound familiar to me. The approach feels like I'm talking to someone who doesn't do airs and graces, right? I don't want airs and graces. I want someone to tell me as it is. So I will go to her to get a consultation on those things, because I don't see her ochre approach and her working with the blokes all day as being a liability to overcome. I see it as her brand and the thing that makes her very unique and gives me a perspective I otherwise wouldn't get from some overpaid KPMG consultant in Sydney. Recognizable people who actually recognize you within those things beats polish every time. I don't want to be a CEO. I want to be chosen for who I am, not for the brand that I sit under. Perfect is replaceable. It's generic. It's the thing that everyone just looks past. Perfect is a TV ad that you don't remember, a radio ad you don't remember hearing, an online banner ad that is just got every visual element absolutely perfect that you never actually saw because you scrolled past it. But recognizable stops the scroll. Recognizable and different will always stop that scroll, because it isn't replaceable. It is unique, one of a kind. And there's a part of us that wants the unique, one of a kind thing. So the goal of you as a brand is not to look perfect, which is a massive release, a massive weight off your shoulders. It's to be recognizable for who you are and what you do, and the very specific, sometimes odd way that you may do it as well. So what I'd like you to do is to continue that learning project. I've got a QR code there for you. And if you registered on Eventbrite, I'm going to send you through the link to this as well. It's a interactive guide that takes you through all this. So I'll leave this up for a little bit longer, and it's got lots of pieces that help you work through that. And I'll show you what that looks like. Now, if you've missed this, it's okay. You can get it in the replay. But go into the guide right here. It's a bit of an interactive guide where it's got the information, but it's also got a place where you can look at that, all those things you've thought about yourself. So too old, yeah, too queer, yep. Too quiet sometimes, too niche, definitely. I would say too unqualified, too late to this, too broad, or yeah, definitely too. I've got a lot of them. Too not from here. No, not so much. Maybe a little bit. Too tradie, too creative, too weird. Definitely. And I look at that now is that's not a list of problems, it's your brand asset inventory. How can I turn too old into an asset? How do I turn too queer into an asset? Too niche, too weird, too unqualified? How do I make those strengths? And then you work through, and here's a few in here, right? So tab of the weaknesses, and I'll flip it over, and that's the brand asset. So the thick accent, right? Feels like a viability in every meeting. Let's flip that. It's actually instant recognizability. The voice is the single hardest thing to fake in 2026, even with all those voice fakers. Because when you turn up to a meeting with that person, if they don't sound like they did on online, well, then there's no trust there at all. I started too late and too old means you actually have relevant lived experience. I'm not from a big city. Actually, I've got a very real and very realistic point of view. I overthink everything becomes, well, I think with rigor, a rigor that the client can feel and trust. Or you could say, not just rigor is not a word we use a lot in Australia. Perhaps it can be accuracy, attention to detail. I'm too niche really means I own this category. I'm a bit weird means I'm memorable. All the things we're looking at before. Work through this, look at these questions, answer them honestly. And then what we do is basically here's those 4 stages you can work through on your own time. So you just look at those stages, work through them all. And then here's a bunch of prompts to do on paper this week to actually get you. So, what are the 3 things about yourself you never put on your website and LinkedIn because you thought they'd make you feel smaller? Then ask, how would knowing this make a good client trust me faster? Work through those questions and where your brand currently sits at the moment. I think I'm very unpolished and specific. Some people say I'm very, very polished. What you want to do is aim for the bottom right, unpolished and specific. The smartest square in 2026 sounds like a person says something only you'd say. It's imperfect, it's recognizable, it's hard to copy. This is the win. That's where you want to go. So that's part of what you'll find in that. So I'll just bring that back up on the screen so you can scan that quickly on your phones or just get a bookmark. I will send this through, and this will be online in the next hour or so on YouTube for you to be able to see as well.